The movie begins and we see Soichiro Takakura, a young boy whose mother died soon after he was born and his father joined her mother when he was just 17. But Soichiro never felt alone because he found a new friend, Pete, the cat, soon after his father died. Eventually his father's friend and colleague Koichi adopted him and Pete. Now he had a sister named Riko Matsushita, who also loved Pete. For a few years he studied electronics and mechanical engineering under Koichi. Unfortunately, Koichi and her wife died in a plane crash. And Riko went to live with his uncle Kazuto. Soichiro and Pete left alone in-house. Time skips for 3 years and now it is the 1st of March 1995. Soichiro have invented artificial general intelligence robot called A1. And it's being developed by his uncle's company FWE, stands for Future Work Enterprises. Eventually snow starts to fall and Pete wants Soichiro to open all the doors of house. Because Pete believes, behind one of the door there is summer. Meanwhile Riko comes to visit Soichiro and Pete, and do houseworks for him. She has a bad news for Soichiro, that she will be moving away from the city soon. So she will not be able to visit him often. After A1's success, Soichiro wants to work on a personal project, the plasma battery, which was his late father's dream project. Plasma battery means a battery that won't need to be recharged, and he wants to use the battery in machines. Suddenly his girlfriend Kazuto's assistant Rin Shiraishi comes to visit him, to give him some documents to sign. Riko felt unhappy by the presence of Rin, so she leaves them. The document is a stock assignment approval of FWE company from Soichiro himself to Rin Shiraishi, even though it is mostly a decision from Kazuto. Soichiro agrees to make Rin a shareholder of company and sign without any hesitation. Shiraishi Rin kisses him feeling grateful. After a week on the 8th of March 1995, Soichiro is going to FWE office to meet Kazuto, because he had called him for something urgent. Then Kazuto starts a special shareholder meeting. He wants to sell the A1 project to Manix Enterprises. And stop all of the current development for A1, but Soichiro refuses, saying that A1 is not ready yet. Then Rin comes and joins the meeting. She suggests that they should decide the matter by voting. Soichiro thinks that Rin is on his side, but Rin agrees to sell A1 and votes against Soichiro. Soichiro gets shocked and then realizes that he has been set up by both of them. According to agreement, Soichiro's connection to the company is terminated and he is also forbidden to use all of the company's facilities and equipments. He rushes back to his house and finds that all of his equipment has been taken away by the company. After few minutes Riko comes to visit Soichiro, and sees him in despair, because everything he had has been snatched out of his life. Riko confesses her love to Soichiro and tells him that she won't left him and also help him. But it seems Soichiro has already give up. He treats Riko like a kid, telling her that she can't help him anyway. So Riko slaps him and then leave. Afterwards, he finds an ad poster of Credits Cold Sleep Brochure, a company which can let a person go to cold sleep for 5 to 30 years in a capsule. He brings Pete and immediately goes to place. He decides to use the program for him and Pete, but after his examination the doctor rejects his proposal to get the program, because he finds the blood-alcohol ratio is over the limit in Soichiro's body. So he reschedules the examination for the next day and suggests Soichiro to think about his decision again. That night Soichiro remembers the happy moments he had with Riko sitting in a car with Pete. After giving a lot of think to it, he decides not to give up but to confront Kazuto and Rin once again. Riko arrives at Kazuto's house. She sees Kazuto and Rin together and overhears them when they were talking about completing the A1 and plasma battery project with other engineers. Riko rushes to call Soichiro, but he doesn't pick up the phone. When Kazuto approaches her she says it was her friend on the phone, and escaped him, excusing that he is going to meet her friend. Kazuto checks the last call and realizes it was not Riko's friend and runs to get Riko. Shortly after Soichiro calls Rin and asks for her location. After then Soichiro arrives at Kazuto's house and states that he will see a lawyer to disclose everything and ruin the company's reputation if he doesn't get his equipment back. Rin distracted him and injected drug into his body. When she opens Soichiro's bag Pete comes out and scratches her face and makes her angry and frustrated with his movements. Suddenly a window breaks and Pete runs to the direction, and Soichiro's pickup truck drives away from the house. Suddenly Rin's eyes falls on Soichiro's cold sleep program papers and an idea hits her brain. Then in next scene, we see Soichiro gains his consciousness. But he is inside the cryosleep pod owned by Mannix Enterprises. Rin explains him how she managed to get the program for Soichiro by evading tax for Mannix Company. Then the cryosleep pod starts and Soichiro is forced to sleep. In the next scene we see Soichiro wakes up and a doctor is examining his body. Soichiro seems a bit confused, then the doctor tells him he has been in cold sleep for 30 years and today's date is February 28, 2025. Soichiro asks the doctor about Pete and doctor calls Pete, but it's not Soichiro's cat, it's a robot named Pete. Then Pete bring him to his room where he will be staying for 5 days. Since Pete is a robot, he assumes that the robot will execute his commands. So he command him to go and tell the person in charge that he wants to leave right now. Pete then leaves saying such a pain, which surprises Soichiro. On that night Soichiro is informed that there are no assets to his name because Mannix went bankrupt. He also given Rico's address because Rico repeatedly calls the hospital to inquire about his awakening. The next morning Pete brings Soichiro's breakfast to his room, but Soichiro has run away from hospital. He comes out of the hospital and sees everything has become so advanced, and tall buildings are all around the city. As he waits for taxi in a taxi stand, Pete comes there and calls the taxi through a mobile application. Then they both get in taxi and Soichiro commands Pete to get out of taxi. But Pete refuses, saying he escaped the hospital and he is defective. And he only wants to see the world with him because he is a robot mechanic and can fix him if he malfunctioned. Pete and Soichiro arrived at the address. When they entered in the house they found Rin Shiraishi, who is now a fat and ugly woman. It turns out Rin was the one who was calling him and gave him her address. Rin says that Kazuto died 1 year after Soichiro goes to cold sleep and she was sent to jail because a mysterious man exposed her for evading taxes. She also tells Soichiro that the night he was drugged his house burned and Rico was nowhere to be found. He assumes Rico is dead and mourns at her grave. Soichiro, sitting on the place where he first met Pete as a kid, remembers about Pete, who always looks for the door into summer even though snow just started to fall. Then he is motivated to look for the door, which means the mysterious man that Rin mentioned and Rico's death. Pete and he started searching and they find out that FWE was acquired by Guardian manufacturers. Eventually Pete gets ready to activate sleep mode. The sleep mode is where a robot goes into a state of self-regeneration. Soichiro tells Pete to show him his battery, and when Pete shows him the battery it turns out that the battery is none other than the plasma battery. Pete is the product from Aladdin Industries, one of the dominating humanoid robot makers. The following day they go to visit the Guardian company. There Pete tries to ask one of the female robots out for a date, but gets a rejection. Soichiro also gets reject to see the president, but suddenly the robot allowed them to see the president. The president Gota is very glad to see Soichiro. It seems like he knows Soichiro from long ago. Then Gota shows him the book signed by himself. Gota also tells him that he invented plasma battery and gave its right to Aladdin company. After that Gota tells him that he went to meet Professor Toy in a restaurant and signed the book for him at the same place a long time ago. Then they see a news recording about Professor Toy embezzled money to fund his research, that is called time transfer machine. Despite all that, Soichiro is very confused and can't remember anything. He then assumes that there is someone using his identity to complete the plasma battery. Then they go back to Gota and there they find out that Soichiro's stock was assigned to one of the founder of Aladdin company, Sato Taro. And they also found that the inventor of first robot model with plasma battery was Soichiro himself and Taro is patent attorney. And the inventor of the second model is Sato Rico. Then Soichiro realizes something after connecting all the informations he have. And the next morning Pete and Soichiro went to meet Professor Toy. But he doesn't wants to meet the strangers. When Soichiro told him his name he suddenly opened the door and hugged Soichiro. He asked Soichiro to get back to 30 years ago as he already completed the time transfer machine perfectly. Turns out the mastermind behind all of the events is Soichiro himself. Professor Toy also gives Same some gold biscuits to fund his research for his past self. then farewells to Pete. The machine starts to activate, but then Pete rushes towards him and they both are transferred to the past. Soichiro wakes up on the 2nd of March 1995. He sees Sato Taro in front of him. Taro cashed out the gold he brought from the future. Taro knows everything as Pete told him everything. Taro lives with her wife Midori. At night they both planned everything that must be done, and after that Soichiro starts to work on the plasma battery blueprint. The next day he goes to visit Professor Toy in a restaurant. He gives all the money to Professor Toy. At first he rejected it but eventually accepted the money after Soichiro explained him everything. After that the shop owner's son Gota, who admires Soichiro because of his inventions, he asks him for his hand sign on a book. The following night we see Taro explains to Soichiro about her wife's disability caused due to a car accident. After that Soichiro asks Sato Taro to help him exposing Ren Shiraishi for the crime of doing tax evasion, to take down Manix Enterprises. Then all the stock shares will be given to Taro. And he will become the president of the new company which he later named Aladdin. Also asks him to let Reko stay with them. After a few days the day comes when Soichiro got tricked by Kazuto and Rin. Pete chases the truck that contains Soichiro equipments. He gets hit by truck but it doesn't stop him. The drivers run away from the truck in fear. Meanwhile Soichiro finishes the blueprint of plasma battery and then go to Kazuto's house. He breaks the window and take Pete the cat away with him. Then he go to meet Riko who is looking for him after overhearing Kazuto's conversation. Then Pete the robot arrives and he burnt Soichiro's house where he spent most of his time. Then they drive back to Taro's house. After they arrive Soichiro introduces Riko to Sato Taro. And then he farewells Riko and Pete the cat. The next day Soichiro and Pete the cat both goes to Credis to take the cold sleep program. Then we see Riko studies hard and also become an inventor. 10 years after that she also takes a cold sleep program. 30 years later Soichiro wake up, Pete the robot and Pete the cat is also there. After knowing that Riko is also going to awake from cold sleep, he rushes to meet her. Soichiro and Riko meets again. And the movie ends. Make sure to subscribe our channel and hit the bell icon to stay notified about our new videos. Thanks for watching.